Class heroes, this is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The opening statements, opening arguments all wrapped up. And what we saw right before us, you saw the House managers, the Democrats, take to the floor of the Senate and make a well thought out, logical, legal, cogent argument for the removal of this president based on facts, based on reading the transcripts, based on the testimony that was available to them. And they did it in a way that was extremely compelling. Then we saw 3 days of the Republican defense, the Trump defense, which was incoherent at best to begin. And then, brought you the whole buffet of conspiracy, dismissal, deflection, and by the way, ignoring facts, while calling their conspiracies facts, which is a weird kind of place for them to be. But when I guess it's all you've got, it's all you've got. In fact, one of the Trump lawyers, Jane Raskin, made that argument. You've heard the legal argument: when the law's not on your side, you argue the facts. When the facts aren't on your side, you argue the law. And when neither's on your side, you pound your fist on the table and you scream and holler. And where I thought she was right is she said, when none of that works, you then deflect, which is what the Republicans did. They put everything on. We got to have Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. It's all about Hunter and Joe Biden at this point. Because that's all they've got is, hey, over here, shiny thing. Hoping that all of us will go, oh, yeah, the shiny thing, and forget all of the stuff that's been laid out in front of us. Now, at the beginning of this, I did predict that Mitch McConnell would figure out a way to ensure that no new witnesses, no new documents, no anything would be admitted. They would wrap this up in no time flat, just in time for the State of the Union for Trump to go out and declare that he was exonerated. I'm happy to say I'm not sure that's going to happen because the polling that's just out, 75% of Americans, 3/4 of us, want witnesses. We want to hear John Bolton. And I said this right from the start. I want to know why John Bolton said, I don't want to be part of your drug deal. I mean, at the end of it, that's what I got to know. Rudy Giuliani taking the stand would be great. It would be great for Pompeo and Mulvaney and down the list of Trumpites. I would love to see them be cross-examined. But Bolton this week coming out and saying, yep, everything the Democrats are saying about a quid pro quo, yep. In fact, he told me he was withholding the aid until he got the investigation into Biden. And you go, were the Republicans listening? And the answer is no. But I think the American people were, because it had been 69%, I think 65% at one point who wanted. Now we've jumped up to 75%. And now we're at 50-50 in the last poll I also saw of having him convicted and removed. You call this a partisan issue? It kind of is. 75% of independents want him impeached, want to hear witnesses. 95% of Democrats want to hear witnesses, and even 49% of Republicans. That's a huge number. When almost half of the Republicans go, yeah, I think we should hear this. This could be bad. This could be really bad for Donald Trump. Because you also had John Kelly, Trump's former chief of staff, saying yes. Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, saying that Trump told him this, told him that he was withholding the aid for the investigation. And John Kelly said, I believe John Bolton. If this is any other president in the history of this country, the vote is 100-0 to impeach. He's done. Stick a fork in him. It's over. But because we live in this cult worship era where Trump has been so put up on this pedestal as some kind of mythical god, the minions don't want to hear anything. So you're never going to get them. This is about the rest of us. And ultimately, this is about, will the Republican Party be able to save itself? Because I've talked to a bunch of people who, they're not happy. Now, does that mean they're going to run over and join the Democratic Party? I don't know, but not great. And now you throw this into the mix because you've had these hearings for the last several days. The other day you had this dust up with Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and an NPR reporter, where and you can get into the argument. Well, he thought it was off the record. She recorded the whole thing. You could argue that he was angry and yelled and an expletive rant and tirade. You could argue that he was upset because he thought. When the reality is if you're in any type of situation where you're talking to a reporter, it's always on the record, unless expressly written otherwise. Except if they explicitly say this is off the record. So afterwards, he got all upset that it wasn't off the record. She recorded it. They got into a big fight. The next day, he throws the reporters off of his press junket. The day that the Trump impeachment arguments wrap up, Trump comes out and says, "Yep, you did a good job handling her. You did a good job handling her." And you go, really? I mean, it's not bad enough that you're being impeached for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Now you're going to applaud someone from tossing reporters off of the beat? The only constitutionally protected piece of employment in this country? You're going to defend that? And again, this leads back to the very thing that I've always said. Donald Trump is an authoritarian guy. He could easily, if we allow it, turn into a dictator. And if you listen to some of his supporters, they want Trump for life. They would be okay with Donald the dictator. The rest of us better wake up to that reality and better remember we're little under 280 days away from Election Day. Register to vote. We cannot normalize the kind of behavior that is going on right now. And if you watch these Senate hearings, it's remarkable at what has become the new normal. It really is quite remarkable that anything that would have taken down any other administration, because I was thinking about this. What if Ronald Reagan's former national security advisor came out and said that Ronald Reagan knew everything about Contra, Iran-Contra, and in fact, pushed the Iran-Contra scheme, and his former chief of staff came out and said, yeah, I believe him. What exactly do you think would have happened back then? They would have run Reagan out on the rails. No question in my mind at that period in history. We are now with a very different Republican Party. And it's very clear, even with the overwhelming evidence and the push from this Bolton, because if this Bolton thing doesn't come out, and I believe that it was I believe it was the NSA. I believe it was somebody in the NSA who leaked this document, because there's only one of them. And John Bolton and his lawyer said he didn't do it. There's one copy, and that's the copy that was given to the White House almost a month ago. They're the only ones who had it. So someone in that chain leaked that. Because look, the Republicans aren't going to save us. The Republicans are not the saviors. Just that simple. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day Carmelita Torres led the bath riots at the El Paso-Juarez border. Mexican workers traveled daily across the Santa Fe Bridge from Juarez, Mexico, into El Paso, Texas for work. As a condition of entry, workers were required to strip naked and be sprayed with a toxic mixture of chemicals. U.S. health officials insisted they were trying to stop the spread of typhus through this type of delousing campaign. However, they were just as motivated by racist typecasting of Mexicans as dirty. David Dorado Romo, author of Ringside to a Revolution, tells the story of 17-year-old Carmelita Torres. Amid rumors that health workers secretly photographed and then distributed photos of the naked women as they were being sprayed, Carmelita crossed into El Paso every day where she worked as a maid. But on this day, instead of stripping down, she refused fumigation and convinced the other women to demonstrate with her against this humiliating daily procedure. Within an hour, she and 200 other women had blocked all traffic coming into El Paso. Newspaper reports claimed several thousand protesters by the end of the day. The women marched to the disinfection camp, hoping to convince those undergoing disinfection to join them. When health officials tried to disperse the crowd, they were met with rocks and bottles. The women then laid down on the trolley tracks to stop the delivery of more workers and wrestled with motormen for control of the cars. The riots lasted for 3 days, but the spraying of Mexican workers with DDT and other toxic chemicals continued for more than 40 years. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and the Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, I go back to the Jay Sekulow thing. You cannot impeach a president on an unsourced allegation. Here's the thing. We have the source of the allegation. You could easily call this. This is one of those moments where you go, and now look, I'm not a lawyer, don't play one on TV, but every lawyer I know has always said you never ask a question or say something that you don't know the answer to. So to me, the answer to Sekulow's statement is call John Bolton as a witness. It seems pretty simple. And I don't know how Republicans are going to get out of this. I don't know how Mitch McConnell is going to get himself out of this. But here to share some thoughts on the opening arguments as we move into the days of questions, which I cannot wait for, by the way. I've asked Sherry Jokubis to come talk with us. Sherry is a political columnist, former RNC spokeswoman, executive producer of America Reads the Mueller Report, and also a never Trumper. Sherry, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So, overall thoughts of the opening arguments?
Look, I can see why Republicans are very nervous right now. And why they didn't take a lot of time today, because there's only so much time you can spend repeating the lie. What we saw last week was masterful, in my view. I think that Trump has about the worst lawyers somebody can have in his position. We have heard that actual good lawyers, real ones, the ones who don't lie and risk being disbarred, would all say no, that nobody wants to do this for him. So he wanted TV lawyers, people who do want to play them on TV but aren't very good lawyers. So, who would you go to? You go to the guy that OJ had. We get these clowns we had Jay Sekulow, who lied about what Mueller found in the Mueller report. So I think with the new polling results that are coming out, we see new polling from several sources in the last couple of days saying basically, Trump's lawyers aren't getting the job done. So people are paying attention, which is the absolute worst news in the world for Trump, which is why they're saying, don't watch anything but Fox. Everything else is fake news. Don't watch this. Tune it out. There's a Quinnipiac poll that just came out today, and you'll like this number. 75% of voters say allow witnesses in the Senate impeachment trial. 75%. You've got, that's huge. You've got a Fox News poll that came out that said 50% of, this is a Fox News poll, 50% of those polled say that they want Trump convicted and removed from office. This is Fox News. So I don't know, do you grade him on a curve? What do you think it is for real?
No, and that's the thing.
This is astonishing.
No, it is astonishing. And here's the thing. The more that this goes on, and this is what I believe Mitch McConnell knows, the longer this plays out, the more troublesome it becomes, because I don't believe Republicans are going to convict him. I don't believe they're going to remove him. That isn't even on the table for me.
However, but there's a lot of buts after that, though.
Exactly. But the buts then become, how do they save themselves? Because there's a lot of them up for re-election this time around.
Yeah. Well, look, I saw somebody suggest on Twitter that McConnell's going to have to give on something. So he'll give a wink and a nod to 3 senators saying they can vote for, if they want to, if they need to save themselves back home, vote for witnesses and evidence. But until they get 4, no deal. But folks back home are watching this. look, these senators don't have any personal loyalty to Trump, and he doesn't have any to them. I wrote right after the midterms, I wrote this, and then again I reiterated it last spring in a piece for Daily Beast, that McConnell, that's why I think Murdoch met with McConnell the day after the midterms. Rupert Murdoch, owns Fox News, traveled from New York, came down to D.C. They met in the Capitol in McConnell's office, and I think they were thinking of various strategies when they're going to have to push Trump to the exit ramp. So we're at a point now where, it's taking longer than I thought. No one's blinking yet, but to your point, McConnell's going to have to let his members, his senators, do what they need to do to save themselves back home. Trump will not, he's not going to be convicted. He's going to be acquitted. But this will be something that's going to be talked about between now and Election Day. It's going to be hung around his neck. There's going to be more information that comes out. And it's going to make these Republican senators look really, really bad. It's going to hang around their neck. It's going to be an albatross around their neck. They're going to, possibly, the House could come and impeach Trump again for other things. I think they should be impeaching him for the 10 counts of obstruction of justice in the Mueller report.
Exactly.
So this isn't over by a long shot. Just because they acquit him, this ain't over.
Yeah, and not to mention all the emoluments crimes that I believe are out there. But that's a whole other conversation. But Cipollone, the one guy said that, the one lawyer said that we need to call on the senators. How did he put it? To put an end to the era of impeachment. And I'm going, well, we could do that if we had a president who you would bring an era to the end of corruption. I mean, that would be great too.
That would be great. Yeah, they're blaming it on the process. We're supposed to let Trump get away with his crimes because we're only going to allow one impeachment per century, and we've already used that one up. So, that just, actually, no. Hey, this is a new century, right?
Yeah.
When was Clinton impeached? No, we can do this, one per century. We'll take it. But I saw someone also suggest, I read all this stuff, and people have some really good ideas when they're just kind of spitballing on Twitter, suggesting that Republicans vote against witnesses. Bolton's book comes out right before the election and is backed up by John Kelly. Then that's the ball game for like 3 Senate seats, and it's going to really hurt. And that means that Mitch McConnell loses his majority in the Senate. Now, after this happens, there's all kinds of scenarios, and of course, different scholars, legal scholars, constitutional scholars disagree on this. But if Trump loses in
280
November,
days.
You're just marking them off the calendar.
It's off the calendar.
You can't wait. Yeah. So if he loses, so now what happens? So the next Department of Justice, the next person in that position is not going to be Bill Barr. That means that Trump can still be indicted and prosecuted for all of his crimes, but including those 10 counts of obstruction of justice as outlined in the Mueller report. So, okay, can Pence now pardon him? Well, there's some disagreement. If he's impeached for those crimes, then he can't be pardoned, although most people say no. I've read different things on this, but the bottom line is it would be up to Pence to want to pardon Trump. I don't know if he has to be indicted first, but once they're gone, so you don't impeach him for these things. You don't indict him yet. Because you can't. Can you pardon somebody if they haven't yet been indicted?
Yeah, no, I don't believe so. But I don't.
So Pence can't. So then we have a new president, a new vice president, a new AG, run by Democrats. The clock runs out. Trump is out of office in January, and then he can be indicted and prosecuted. And I just think that's one line of thinking that, and a possible road. A path that they're leaving open.
Yeah, I've heard everybody talk about that, and I just don't see it happening. Just like Obama didn't go after the criminals who crashed Wall Street and collapsed our economy. Just like every administration doesn't go out. Clinton didn't go after H.W. Bush and all the other stuff that was going on. I just don't see Joe Biden, if he's the nominee and ultimately the winner, I just don't see him going back.
He was asked about it. He said, I will let my AG do his or her job. It's up to the AG. Now you have Elizabeth Warren, who has pledged to hold to account all of them, all of them who've done this in this administration, anybody who broke the law, anybody, all of the corruption. So she has pledged to do it. So I don't know. That remains to be seen. Will the American people stand for sweeping this under the rug and pretend that, well, we can't handle it, we need to heal the nation, and that'll just divide the nation more? You know, I think very differently. I think that we need to know that we don't let people get away with this. We need to know that the system works. We need to know that our justice system works. We don't allow this. And if we don't punish him, if we don't punish everybody who broke the law, who thumbed their nose, basically gave the finger to the Constitution, then why do we have laws? Then it's left up only to the voters. Why do we have a justice system? So
I'm 100% with you on this, 100%. But the problem is, and as you said at the beginning, 50% of the country wants him convicted and removed. There's a good number that don't. I mean, we're pretty much split down the middle on this guy. And this is one of those moments where, if there was a consensus, yeah, I could see that. But this is just another continuation of how split we are, because I talked to so many Trump supporters who say he didn't commit a crime. He did nothing wrong. It was a perfect phone call. He was just doing what we've always done. I've gotten every excuse possible to defend that this isn't a crime. And pretty much the last 3 days of Republican lawyer talking points.
Well, again, I'm looking at just a poll today. They want to allow witnesses. I think there might be some people that don't feel strongly about it. They're not going to say, look, the guy should be removed, and also, bring in those witnesses and the evidence. And then all of a sudden they're going to have a problem if justice is served. I think even Richard Nixon had 24% support at the time he left office. Do we coddle those people who are either so immoral or so anti-American or so stupid or so unethical that they can't give up? Do we coddle them? They're the minority, so that we don't get justice because, we want their votes next time? I just, I'm not getting it.
No, it's a good point, but here's the thing. I would argue that a good number of them...
Are those people going to vote Democrat later anyway? I mean, if you're sticking with Trump, right, that's a tough one. So I think the justice has to be served. I think more people want it served than not.
No, I'm right there with you. And the coddling of the crazies and all of that. I look at what happened in Virginia a week ago Monday. You had that huge rally of people who showed up with their guns. To me, that wasn't a lobby day. That wasn't a rally. That was a show of force. That was saying, hey, screw with us and we'll come to your city armed and ready to cause trouble.
It was a threat.
It was a dry run for
a threat of violence.
Yep, and it was for me. It was a dry run for when they believe Trump has been wronged, and this is where I'm with you. I hope he's held accountable. I hope that people will go to the polls in 280 days and throw the bums out. All of them, all of the people who've stood in the way and covered this up, because this to me is the death of the Republican Party. And you, as a Republican, and I don't know if you still identify as one. But
oh no, I left the party when Trump became the nominee. I've been an independent for 3.5 years now. Yeah.
So is there any hope for what the party has become? Because, I know a lot of people, I've always been a Republican. I'm going to stand by the party, but I don't really like Trump, but he's our guy, which is just kind of nuts.
It is kind of nuts. And I don't understand that thinking. They aren't paying attention. They're only watching Fox News. Trump's not just a kind of a nasty guy. He is a criminal. He is a misogynist. He is a racist. He's a traitor. He has sold us out to Putin. What he's done with Putin is so incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And this is not, we just don't like the guy, or why do you hate him? They try to make it about your feelings. So the people that have that tone, that very light tone that you just gave, I think they're uninformed. I think they are not accessing accurate information. They don't know how bad this is, and it's very, very difficult to keep up with a lot of it.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. And I think that the impeachment hearings, the information is pretty simple. And that's why you've got the Republicans. I mean, what Ted Cruz is saying, the fact that now we've got, what was it? I'm going to go back to Pam Bondi here. Pam Bondi wants to make it illegal for nepotism? Well, great. Was there nepotism with Hunter Biden? Was he getting privilege because he was an elected official's kid?
Yes.
Well, duh. And that means that 3/4 of that entire Senate chamber would have to clear out if that were the case.
Yep.
All of their kids.
Yep.
You get this. All of their relatives. That's nothing new. We don't have to like it, but it's not illegal. simply is not illegal. And then the threats to have Obama come and testify for what? For what? So they can't defend Trump. They have no defense. They can't say that this didn't happen. They have to make this up about the Bidens in order to, pound this square peg into a round hole to make this fit, because you cannot deny or defend what Trump has done. There simply isn't anywhere to go with it.
And Trump keeps telling people to read the transcript, and I keep telling people to read the transcript because it's damning information.
Well, it's not even really a transcript. It's a summary of a transcript. It's not. There isn't even a real transcript. Look, innocent people don't withhold evidence. Don't withhold. Tell people they can't testify unless they think those people are going to testify and give information that is damning to the accused. That is the only reason.
Right. And if there were witnesses out there to exonerate him, they'd be front and center.
There would be, and they don't have them. So right now we're hearing that they're going to do everything they can, obviously, to keep Bolton from testifying. But the information will get out. They can't keep it. They can't keep it away. And we do have, there's a reason why Reality Winner is in prison still. They want to threaten people and make them think that if you go against us, this is what can happen to you. So Bolton's not a stupid guy. He'll find a way. I mean, he wants to make the money off this book, but the information is going to come out.
Right.
I'm a little bit disappointed that they're not hauling Lev Parnas up to Capitol Hill during all of this. I think one thing that would be good is if the House Democrats kind of took control of the narrative and had this very damning information come out in live testimony, competing, do a split screen and have this come out, or at a different part of the day, but control the narrative, control the news cycle, get it out there now, have it come out, unless they just want to drag this out. But when you've got competing narratives, that's something. We had last week, all of the Twitter hashtags were all about impeachment, what was going on. And yesterday, I guess the night before, I had started one. I left the GOP, and it trended. It got to number one. Yesterday, as Republicans were launching their defense of Trump and impeachment, the number one trending hashtag was "I left the GOP." And I had asked everybody to say when you left and why. And as I just told you, I left 3.5 years ago when they nominated Trump, and I became an independent. And so there were literally thousands of these hashtags, and we had a couple news items about it. And I think that is an example of how you can take the narrative and run with it. We've just had this Fox News and talk radio and Donald Trump just pounding on us for 3.5 years. We've had all his Twitter bots, and I think that there's been this sense that there's just this tsunami of pro-Trump crap out there, and with the help of Putin and all the propaganda, that we can't beat him, we can't win.
Right.
But we can. But we do have to be focused, we have to be diligent, and we can't give up.
Yeah. Last question I've got for you, because you've humped all this onto Trump, and I'm with you. He's horrible. But the reality is, and I think you alluded to it with Fox News and the conservative talk radio that's just dominating the airwaves. This has been the direction that the Republican Party has been taking for the last 20 years, 30 years. I mean, he's the manifestation of what the Republican Party has been moving towards, I think, for a very long time. Would you agree with that?
I think that to a degree that you're correct. And, I worked on Capitol Hill for many years, and then I was a senior staffer. I've been a policy person, a political person, communications director. I've run campaigns. I was an adjunct professor at the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University. So I've been in the game for a while. I'm very old, but I'm very experienced. And when I first came to Capitol Hill, I was what my father said, we are Bob, Michael, Howard Baker Republicans. And those names might not mean anything to younger people, but Bob Michael was Republican leader of the House. I worked for him. I'm from Peoria originally. Howard Baker, he was married to a Illinois girl my folks knew. And that's when you were a fiscal conservative, pro-defense. The social stuff, the real right-wing nutty stuff, kind of was starting back then, but it wasn't really prevalent. And I have to say, I noticed that there were these weird fringe groups, and then little by little over the years, these far right-wing nutcases, they made me very uncomfortable. But we kind of had to deal with them because they were part of the coalition. And at some point, it's like burning the frog slowly. At some point, they just more and more started taking over. And there have been many times when I was a Republican and working on Capitol Hill and doing campaigns where I was uncomfortable, or I would be asked to go on, say, Fox News and discuss something, and they would be very clear about what position they wanted, and I couldn't do it because that just wasn't me. Right. I've always been a moderate. I understand that now makes me a rhino, and that's apparently something horrible. So I think there's a lot more people like me in the Republican Party than maybe we know.
I hope so.
We've kind of been silenced. Yeah. Well, I think that's where the 75% that we're seeing now of people who you want witnesses in the Senate impeachment trial, and 50% of folks, those aren't all Democrats, who are saying that they want Trump, convicted and removed. Some of those are Republicans, and there's probably a whole lot more who, if they're not fully saying they want him convicted and removed, they want something done. Maybe they're not convinced yet, but I don't see how he wins them all back. The only way Trump can win, the only way the Republicans can win, is if they get Putin to cheat for him again. Yeah. And we know that's happening.
No, absolutely. I hear it all the time. Cheating seems to be and that's why I think that McConnell knows the rig is in, and we'll see how this plays out. But Sherry, I appreciate the thoughts at the time. Fantastic talking to you.
Great talking to you too. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great stuff. Make sure you check out Sherry's Twitter page. Fantastic stuff. Sherry Jacobus. Gonna take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. This is the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I said earlier, what a fun day today was. And look, like I said, I think the Republicans, I think Trump's defenders did a good job of not going on and on and on. And I think, as Sherry said in the last segment, how many, probably because they can't tell the same lie over and over again. It is what it was. But thank you, Jay Sekulow and all of the Trump defense team for not making me sit through an entire 8 hours of making stuff up. I'm glad you kept it to 2. Thank you. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the opening arguments and where things go from here. I've asked Sam Berger to come talk with us. Sam is the Vice President for Democracy and Government Reform over at the Center for American Progress. Sam, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks so much for having me on.
So, I'm looking at this and I'm grateful. Hey, it was a good 2 hours. They were done. I was able to go out my life, but it was kind of redundant. It was kind of the same stuff over and over again, which didn't actually defend Trump.
Yeah, I think one of the strangest parts about this is the fact that hanging over all of this, you have the John Bolton revelations that blow up the core of Trump's impeachment defense. The whole argument is no one knows
recently,
why he was
unemployment insurance protections
There's no first-hand account, therefore there's nothing you can do. And then you have John Bolton say, "Oh, I was there. He was holding it up for the very reason. Of course, we all know why he was holding it. He was holding it up to get this information on his political opponent." And so, finally, today, Jay Sekulow talked about that fact, but he did so in a way that made it clear that John Bolton has to come in and testify, because he basically stood there and said, here are all these people that disagree with what John Bolton said. Well, guess what? When we're having a trial, we have a way to figure this out. We bring the people in, and we hear from them firsthand, under oath.
In fact, the exact line that I tweeted out that for me is one of those, as I said in the last segment, every lawyer knows there are questions you don't ask if you don't know the answer to, or statements you don't make. He said you cannot impeach a president on unsourced allegations. Well, we have the source. We can call the source. We can have him sit down and say what he meant when he wrote it. This is probably the worst statement of their entire opening argument, in my view.
Oh, I would agree. I mean, I think the only other thing that struck me, I think it was on the first day, where they basically said, why is the House not making our case for us? There's all this evidence. The American people paid good money for that evidence. They should get to see it. I'm thinking, there's some other evidence that they should also get to see. I mean, it's the absurdity. It's very difficult for a lawyer to go through, to basically argue for a trial with no witnesses and no evidence, because it's so absurd that kind of you sort of you lose track of the fact that that's the sort of point I'm making, because the natural rhythm that you have is they have witnesses, I have witnesses, they have evidence, I have evidence. And so, you see the Trump team keep falling into this trap because, in essence, they're arguing absurdity. You should have a trial that has no witnesses and no evidence.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of remarkable if you stop and you think about it. But again, it leads me back to it's all they have. I mean, because they didn't actually make in my view, a real defense of Trump doing what he did. Which, if you read the transcript, it was very simple. There's a straight line between, you'll get the money when I get my investigation.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of fascinating. The thing that I always think about, imagine if you were making a movie, right, and you have a scene where the first person comes up and they says, hey, I really need help with something, and then the other person says, I'll help you, but do us a favor, though. You wouldn't feel like you needed to provide any more context for your audience to understand what was going on, right? We would all read that. We'd be like, oh, yeah, the one guy's saying he's only going to help the other guy if he gets the thing he wants.
Yep.
This is
the other part of this,
clear.
Yeah, and the other part of this, Sam, is everyone keeps thinking that the two presidents, Donald Trump and Zelensky, are on equal playing field. They're on an equal level. They're not. I made the analogy of, it's kind of like the difference in power is kind of like the commissioner of Major League Baseball and the guy who runs my kid's local Little League team. That's the difference of power there.
Yeah, well, except the guy who runs your kids Little League, does he actually need the commissioner of baseball, right? It's sort of like, it's more like if, you're talking, if you need something from somebody, right? Like this aid is critical. The support of the United States is critical. They're in a hot war with Russia, shooting war with Russia.
Right.
And so there's this tremendous pressure, and particularly with a novice president coming in who's got to establish that credibility. And so, the power dynamics are central to what's going on, and also central to why, Ukraine is sort of saying, keep us out of this. It's sort of like one of the other defenses as well. We keep going back to Ukraine and saying, are you being extorted? Are you being extorted? And they keep saying, oh, no, it's totally fine. Don't worry at all. Just please,
please give us the Javelin missiles that we need to defend ourselves.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Just keep giving us the aid and the support. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's sort of the Trump defense is asking people to check their common sense at the door.
Yeah, it's ludicrous. And again, I keep getting the maggots who keep throwing back, well, there's no established crime here. And I'm going, well, there are crimes here. Bribery is a crime last time I checked.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The House report actually goes through in detail and outlines two specific crimes. This is the House Judiciary Committee report. It outlines the crime of bribery and honest services fraud, and specifically through the use of wire fraud, because the fraud was committed via the telephone communications between Zelensky and Trump.
Right.
But you have bribery, you have honest services fraud, you have GAO pointing out that the hold itself was illegal. GAO is a nonpartisan government agency that's responsible for monitoring the use of taxpayer dollars. They took a look at the hold and said, this is illegal, and it's clearly illegal. I mean, there aren't criminal penalties attached there, but it is a legal violation. And then, any time you commit a crime and you involve other people in it, you have criminal conspiracy. So you've got a whole range of crimes, not to mention things like campaign finance crimes, because you can't just ask a foreign power to come in and help you win an election. So there's really a range of criminal actions that are encompassed within the abuse of power.
Right.
Right. That in the process of doing this, undertaking this impeachable conduct, engaging this high crime and misdemeanor, he also engaged in a series of federal crimes.
So the question then becomes, now to your point that he asked for help, but look, he got away with it in 2016. So the elections thing is kind of down the road, but the folks will then turn around and go, well, why wasn't he charged with that? Why aren't the articles of impeachment going specifically after that? And it's one of those things that I've even asked. I get the obstruction of Congress. Absolutely. There's 71 cases of asking for documents, all the cases of asking for witnesses and being rebuffed at every turn. But the other thing isn't abuse of power isn't the straightforward crime that I think most people or a lot of people want to see.
Yeah, well, I mean, so abuse of power is really at the core of why impeachment, of the need for impeachment. That was the thing that the founders were most concerned about. An executive who would abuse his or her power and use it for personal gain, use it to invite foreign influence, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so the title there is really getting at what the House is concerned with, which is impeachable conduct. But in the context, but if the title doesn't just say abuse of power. Title 2, like it explains why, or Article 2, I should say, it explains in Article 1 what that abuse of power looks like, and that description, as someone reads through, is consistent with the crimes of honest services fraud and bribery, because that's basically the conduct that Trump undertook. Both violates criminal law and is a high crime and misdemeanor under the Constitution.
Right.
So I think that it's simply a matter of like what the House is really talking about and what they're kind of aimed squarely at, because they don't charge people with federal crimes, right? That's the job of the Department of Justice, which of course under the Trump administration
is in the bag.
Yeah.
You're right on there.
So anyway, but I think the key thing here is, this is really bad stuff, right? If you did this, if I did this, if a public official did this, they'd be in serious trouble. And
Sure.
in fact, there are thousands of public officials who are charged with exactly this kind of activity, not every year, right? But over the course of, you saw Chris Collins and Duncan Hunter, two of Trump's first two members to publicly endorse him. They both were indicted and actually pled guilty to abusing public trust, misusing campaign funds, insider trading based on knowledge that they had because of their position. What happened to them? They had to step down, and they're actually going to go to prison. But we know what happens when you violate the public trust. You lose your job.
Right.
We see it happen time and time again. There's no reason that Donald Trump should be above the law.
No, I'm right there with you. But what do you say to the argument that they make that, well, we're so close to an election, Sam? Come on, we're so close to an election. We should just let the voters decide.
Well, the whole issue is that he's trying to cheat in that election.
And that's the
right,
simple answer. And I every time they bring this up, that's what I'm screaming at the TV. That's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to let voters decide is to get rid of the guy that's trying to cheat in the election and have a fair one. I mean, that's sort of an odd. That's never really made any sense to me, whatsoever, because that's really the core of the problem. He doesn't want to have a fair election. What he's doing is trying to take away people's ability to exercise their vote in a free and fair election.
Yeah.
And we know he keeps doing this. The thing, people focus, and rightly so, on the numerous contacts, the invitation with, Russian
the emails.
Yeah. Well, and all the various contacts with Russian-linked agents and all of that sort of thing. But also, the inviting of the interference, the utilizing of that interference. But remember, entirely separate from that, his personal attorney is in prison right now because he engaged in campaign. He broke campaign law to try and cheat to help the president win an election. And
yeah, we forget about Michael Cohen, don't we?
We forget not just that Michael Cohen is there, but
and Paul Manafort. We forget about both of them.
Yeah, but remember, Michael Cohen worked closely with someone who was named as Individual One, and of course we don't know who Individual One is, except that we know that he won the presidential election in 2016.
Right.
So we have a pretty good guess at who Individual One is. He's named throughout it, every step of the way, working with Michael Cohen on this stuff. So it's not, this is someone who's repeatedly cheated. If anything, any chance he gets, he cheats. And so this notion that it would be shocking that he would cheat in this election, it's just not credible. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is. He's very upfront.
No, it's true. And one of the arguments that the lawyers made is, at least today, was that, this is a deep policy difference. Donald Trump, has this deep policy knowledge, and I kept hearing him say this, and I'm going, really? Is there anything that Trump really knows deeply? I mean, he doesn't seem like a policy wonk to me. I could be wrong, but he just doesn't seem like the policy wonk type.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer to that is go investigate the Bidens isn't a policy. Corruption. Right.
Since you brought up the Bidens, though, what's the fixation with them? I mean, if these crimes were there that I'm told, by all of my maggot friends that are out there, why didn't the Republicans investigate them when they had control of the House for 2 years?
Yeah, why didn't they raise it at any point? I mean, the thing is, why did Republicans want to remove the same prosecutor that the Obama-Biden administration did? Because everyone knew he was corrupt.
Right.
He wasn't investigating anything. That was the whole problem. I mean, the thing about it that's weird, it's not just that the claims that Biden was corrupt are misplaced. He was, in fact, fighting corruption. He was making it more likely that this company would come under investigation. He was basically serving as an example of what you're supposed to do when you're given the public trust, which is act on behalf of the public, regardless of its impact on you in your personal capacity or your family or anyone. And so the whole thing has been entirely twisted. It's not a situation in which there's Biden corruption, but exactly the opposite. Biden fighting corruption, regardless, carrying out what's in the national interest, something supported on a bipartisan basis, and not just in the United States, but across the world, because everyone knew that this person was corrupt. No. The same person now that Rudy Giuliani is trying to get statements from, the conservatives are lifting up as this hero, because they don't care about any of this. I mean, you heard Pompeo say, who cares? The Americans don't care about Ukraine, or, do you think they care about Ukraine? It's just another tool for them to try and win an election by any means necessary.
No, I absolutely agree with you. But, the Biden thing keeps popping up because, there's some kind of equivalency they want to make. That, because Joe Biden said that you fire the prosecutor or we're going to, hold that $1 billion back. I've had this thrown at me a bunch, and I go, yeah, but what Joe Biden didn't say is, oh, by the way, also, dig up dirt on my political opponent. Do me a favor. He didn't say that. He said, we and the rest of the international community think this guy's corrupt. He's got to go before you can get these reforms moved through, and then you'll get money.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like if you were arrested for robbing a bank, and then your offense was, I had a gun. When the police showed up, they had guns too. Well, yeah, but they were doing a different thing. You were committing the crime, and they were stopping the crime. And so it's again, it's this sort of whataboutism, but it's not even really logical.
Yeah.
It's not trying to make an argument. It's trying to provide an excuse for GOP senators to just stand with Trump and violate their oath to the Constitution.
No, you're spot on there. So, overall thoughts of the opening arguments?
Well, I have to say I thought that the House managers just did an incredible job. It was long, and I imagine that most people didn't watch every single minute of every single hour, but I think they presented an incredibly strong case, and I think, in particular, Adam Schiff really did a masterful job of bringing home why this matters. And I think in a world in which you had an open-minded jury that was looking kind of even-handedly at the evidence, it wouldn't be any question. That's not what we're dealing with, so it's hard to say, but I think this really drove home the same point again and again, which is that House managers have an incredibly coherent story that's backed up by virtually every piece of evidence that's been collected. And Trump has a sort of hodgepodge of conspiracy theories, outright falsities, and then taking one small thing and trying to say, well, this means that nothing happened in the first place. And then, of course, the final answer, which is, I did it, but who cares?
Yep.
I mean, that's really where this is going. You can see it, because the rest of these arguments just aren't tenable. I think eventually they're going to land on some version of, who's to say it's bad to cheat an election?
And that's what scares me the most, because once we get to that point where we're starting to pick other countries, this is just not, this is the end of the whole game then. So how do you see this playing out as the week goes on? Because, I'm anticipating it to be really close. I think Sherry said a moment ago that the latest poll, 75% of the people in the country want to see witnesses. They want to see John Bolton How do you see the senators voting over I guess it's Friday. How do you see them voting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to know. I mean, at this point, Friday feels like a long time away from today. So much can happen. I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure on senators to hear from witnesses, at least from John Bolton. But there's this sort of argument being put forward. Well, if the House managers get a witness, then Trump should get a witness. I think there's a great response, which is fine. Call Mulvaney too, then, right? Because everybody that the Democrats want to call, they're not sort of like these anti-Trumpers or like political opponents. They're his closest advisors who were involved in everything that happened.
Yep, call people who are on the call.
Yeah, so if he did nothing wrong, he should be really excited to have them all come up and say, "Oh yeah, it was all perfectly fine."
No, I'm right there with you.
People should ask themselves, why are the folks that are closest to it, that have seen exactly what has happened, that are most likely to know what was in Trump's mind? Why is he fighting so hard for us to hear from them? And we know, in one case, why with Bolton, because he's going to tell us, yeah, he did it. Yeah. Interesting question why he can't seem to find anyone else in his administration willing to come forward and say, oh, no, he didn't.
Yeah, no one wants to perjure themselves. Good call. I'm hoping it's a 50-50 tie, and John Roberts has to cast the deciding vote. That's kind of the intrigue where I want to see it go next.
Well, that would raise a whole host of parliamentary issues too. So I'm more hopeful that there's a crisis of conscience among GOP senators, and we actually get to hear from witnesses. But I'm not necessarily holding out hope for that.
Yeah, I'm with you, Sam. I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Good work you guys do. Keep it up. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Good stuff. Sam Berger, Vice President of Government Reform. Again, this is one of those moments where you look at, just how insane this whole process has been. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show. Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
So I got to tell you, I look at the latest Congressional Budget Office numbers, and the CBO is saying that the federal government's going to spend $4.6 trillion in the fiscal year of 2020, which ends on September 30th. We're going to bring in $3.6 trillion in tax revenue, which means we're going to have a $1.02 trillion deficit in what is supposedly the greatest economy ever. I got to tell you, this is one of those moments where you go, where are all the Tea Party people? Where are they at? Especially if you look at the backdrop of what's going on with this impeachment process. It's really, I'm stuck on the Jay Sekulow thing. I'm stuck on him saying, well, you can't believe anything that you hear, like John Bolton, because it's an it's an unnamed source. We really can't have that. Without going, hey, we should have witnesses. We should have witnesses soon and now. But for me, the fiscal part in all of this is the scary stuff. Because look, I don't believe he's going to be impeached. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to be. I'm sorry, he's not going to be removed from office. History will remember him as a president who was impeached. He's just not going to be removed from office and convicted, which is going to embolden him to do the things that he really wants to do. And my fear is, on the backdrop of the massive budget deficits that they've created, because remember, this is the greatest economy ever. This is supposed to be the time where you start paying back some of that money that you borrowed during the downturn. That's how this, the hill and valleys are supposed to go. That's what you prime the pump, you get the economy going when times are good, you pay it back so that the next time you create a crisis, which is, probably going to come sometime soon, that you have the ability to weather that storm. What we've done through horrible tax policy, again, the only real thing that the Republicans have gotten through is the tax heist, which has created this massive deficit. So by giving away all the revenue that we did to the very wealthy and increased massive amounts of military spending, we've now created this monster. Again, another $1 trillion deficit year. And understand, the projections are $1 trillion plus every year for the next decade, no matter who the next president is. So the Republicans have effectively done a really good job of creating a crisis that Democrats are going to have to clean up while not being able to use revenue to do things that they want, like Medicare for all, which I think has to happen if you want to save Medicare. So all the people, all the grannies and those out there who are screaming, keep your hands off my Medicare, we better figure out how to save it. Because according to the Congressional Budget Office, Medicare is going to cost $835 billion for fiscal year 2020. That is going to more than double over the next decade. What do you think the talking point is going to be for Republicans post-election? Let's say Trump loses. What do you think the rallying cry for the Republicans is going to be? We're broke. We can't afford to do any of these things. That's coming, and this is part of why they did this. Their mentality has always been starve the beast, make the government as poor as possible, and put us in deepest hock as possible so that you won't be able to respond. So that the next time there's a crisis, Pat Toomey will get his much harder down. Because they wanted more pain and suffering. They wanted more people to lose their homes and their jobs and all of that. Because then the market will naturally rise up. Because they truly believe that the market does all this stuff by itself without any influence. So I'm interested to see where, throughout the impeachment process, where the talk about our deficits are. Because understand, things still have to get done. Work still has to get done. And, understand, and I loved one of the lawyers who said one of the Republican lawyers who said, this esteemed body of the Senate has to get back to doing the people's work. And I literally laughed out loud because there are 400 pieces of legislation that the House has passed over the past 2 years that is sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk that they're going to do nothing on. So the thought that they're going to actually, do their jobs, do the will of the people is laughable at best. I just look at this as one of those moments where this election can't come fast enough. And I'm hoping that people are paying attention and that we start throwing some of these people who have caused this out. And that we return to something of normalcy. Something of, not this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Amazing stuff. Again, like I said, if you missed any of the program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Our society has coined expressions like philanthropist to encourage and hail people's charitable spirit. Look on the flip side of that shiny coin of generosity, however, and you'll find that its base substance is societal selfishness. After all, the need for charity only exists because we're tolerating intentional injustices and widespread inequality created by power elites. A society as supremely wealthy as ours ought not be relegating needy families and essential components of the common good to the whims of a few rich philanthropists. Yes, corporate and individual donations can help at the margins, but they don't fix anything. Thus, food banks, health clinics, etc. must constantly scrounge for more charity, while big donors have their charitable spirit subsidized with tax breaks that siphon money from our public treasury. Especially offensive to me is the common grandiose assertion by fat cat donors that charity is their way of, quote, giving back to society. Hello? If they can give so much, it's probably because they've been taking too much. As business columnist Andrew Ross Sorkin points out, all too often, charitable gifts are used to make up for the failure of companies to pay people a living wage and treat their workers with dignity. It's not just the unemployed who rely on food banks, but janitors, nannies, Uber drivers, checkout clerks, and others who work full-time but are so poorly paid they can't make ends meet. That's not a sad charity case, but a matter of criminal exploitation by wealthy elites. And the charitable thing to do is to outlaw it and require a living wage for all. This is Jim Hightower saying, as Sorkin puts it, the aim should be to create a society where we don't need places like food banks. We should be trying to put the food banks out of business.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, I got a kick out of Jay Sekulow. One of those guys that I'm sure would not be the top choice of most people if they needed a defense lawyer. I don't know. He just didn't seem all that great to me. But this idea he threw out that you can't remove a president during an election year for crimes that they can, it just seems kind of ludicrous to me. But, that's what he threw out there. You can't remove a duly elected Trump because, hey, it's an election year. And that's what the election's for. If they're committing crimes, they should be out. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the day's events, on the opening arguments, and maybe where we go from here. I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come talk with us. Scott is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I am good. So what'd you think? What'd you think of, first thought, thank goodness the Republicans only wasted 2 hours of my time today.
I think that, DVR. And so I think the fast forward button and DVR were created for today. I of course watched it, but it was just, I'd rather watch the commercials. It was just, a bunch of garbage. They basically gave, 15, 16 different lanes for GOP senators to choose from as to excuses and ways to cover things up and lie about it. I mean, it just made no sense. They had no argument where here's the evidence that proves, the Democrats' case is wrong. They didn't have any of that. They said he did it. He did it. So what?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it is. That doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. Hey, what are you talking about? And then they talk about the validity of the impeachment, and then they try and talk about the Constitution while staining it at the same time. It just was a really something that's going to go down in world history as they're not going to be known as good people.
Yeah.
I mean, they aren't.
It's the throw a bunch of what against the wall and see what sticks theory.
Yeah, that's what it was. I think, what's going to happen when Hunter Biden and Joe Biden come out and say, here's exactly what I did. Here's how we got the advisory position. There's not going to be able to be this cloud over them, this conspiracy theory. So, that I say, why not have them be witnesses if, we get ours as well? Like if they have nothing to hide, then he can clear his name. And we also at the same time can get somebody like Bolton and probably, it seems, Lev Parnas as well to testify.
But what do you say to the person? And I get it from the argument that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden have nothing to do with this. This is a massive distraction. And look, do I think it stinks to high heaven that Hunter Biden was on this board? I actually do. I think nepotism is horrible, top to bottom. I don't think it should happen. But guess what? I live in the real world where this stuff does happen. And if we really want to have a conversation about whose kid's sitting on which board, I think the guest I had a little earlier said it best. You'd be clearing out half of the Senate and half of the House too.
Right. Especially lifelong politicians, because that's who you rub elbows with, is the people who run the companies. So, it makes sense that he's working with people like that across the world. Whether or not it's corrupt, I don't think it is. It's just how he was born into that family, and then that's just what happened.
Right.
That's the people who he was around. But I'm not excusing any of it. I'm just saying, that's the world he's in. It's
right.
not, he can't be in anyways. So it's interesting. I just think, we got to end their conspiracy theories. So I hope they come forward. I hope Hunter comes out and speaks out to clear his name, so they can stop with this nonsense, or at least, he can set the record straight, and that'll end a lot of this. Now, whether or not he's called to testify, I'm not sure if they'll want to do that because they want to keep the cloud around him. So it'd be interesting to see if they'd be willing to testify, or if he would be. I don't think Joe Biden would be willing to testify.
And unless they can come up with a particular crime, because this is how the conspiracy was. This is how I'm getting it. Maybe you've got a better idea on how this conspiracy is. Joe Biden says to the Ukrainian president, you got to clean up your act. You got to get rid of this Viktor Shorkin guy. The international community agrees. Biden says we're not going to give you $1 billion unless you do. He doesn't go on to say, hey, we're not going to give you the $1 billion and I want you to do other stuff. He said you got to get rid of this corrupt prosecutor. He does this in public, and this is where the conspiracy theory gets weird for me, because what's the act? What's the corrupt act that they're claiming that he did? Because the investigation into Burisma was non-existent. It was over. It was dormant. It had been passed a long time ago. In fact, the weird thing is, by Biden saying get rid of this Shorkin guy, he's actually in getting somebody into place who might investigate his kid. So this is actually probably a worse thing for Biden and his kid.
Right. They're alleging Biden did the same thing as Trump did. You see what I'm saying? Like, they're matching the allegations so they can try and act like they're equal. And I think that they're trying to diminish, everything that it stands for.
Well, what favor did Joe Biden ask the Ukrainian president for? Did I miss the favor?
I don't, with that, he was following U.S. policy. He was following U.S. protocol. He was working through diplomats. He was working with the State Department. He was working with the White House. Everything was on record. Everything was, private and public in regards to how it worked. Everything was done through official means. There was no back channel because there was no need for one, because he wasn't breaking the law. He was following the law. He was following the protocol. And so this is, if Biden asked the president of Ukraine for him to investigate Donald Trump, in return, he'd help them out in regards to corruption. And then you also, hold up aid. Then we're talking about maybe a similar situation, but Biden didn't do any of that. And at the same time, it wasn't a hidden kind of conspiracy behind closed doors. Biden, again, did it through normal channels, and he did it the right way.
So, I keep coming back to, if the Republicans really cared about this, where was Jeff Sessions? 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago, where were the Republicans when they controlled the House and the Senate? If this was really on the top of their mind, and this is really what their thought was, that we got to fight corruption, where were they then?
Yeah, I think that they were looking probably into it and thinking about it, but it didn't make sense until he ran for president, so they held on to it. And then they waited for their political opportunity to do so, and here we are. I think it's all calculated. There's no accident here. I don't think that they thought it would backfire, in this way. But it was one of the things, we gotta look into this Trump connection. Overall, I have record of them being linked to businesses and oligarchs in Ukraine since at least 2008. He got a big contribution to the Trump Foundation during his campaign from a Ukrainian oligarch. There's a lot of questions here. And it's not to throw out conspiracy theories. These are all facts. Like, he got like $150,000 or so from Victor Pinchuk's foundation. It was for a video feed that he spoke for like 20 minutes. So you've got that. I found a video of we uncovered a video, my team, of Eric Trump in Ukraine judging a Miss Ukraine contest. And in response to that, the Kiev Post, one of the bigger papers in Ukraine, came out with an article saying Eric Trump wasn't paid for his time when he judged Miss Ukraine.
Of course not.
And it was but that was the thing. We never asked that question. And so, that basically they pointed out, oh no, he never got paid by us. And that was the first response that they had. And I'm like, well then someone paid him. And that's where we're at in that step. And so there's a lot to unravel. We've turned those documents over to the House and the Senate, and also the video and photos that we uncovered. And so but there's a lot more questions there.
Yeah.
Because these are the pro-Putin regime that they were doing business there under. So I think that's more of an investigation there, because you have them there for years, and he's the current president of the United States, and he's already got this other Ukraine scandal.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a bunch of scandals lining up, and I think it was, I forget which lawyer it was. I think it may have been Cipollone, who said that we got to end the era of impeachment. And I'm like, well, maybe if we have a president who ends the era of corruption, because every time you turn around, he's committing a crime.
Yeah, he's really good at committing crimes. He's good at getting caught too, but he's really good at trying to distract people from, him being the focus of all of it. He uses the same repetitive talking points and lines and catchphrases. Never met the guy, he says about his son. You know what I mean? Like, this is how he acts. And that's how mobsters act, and people think of it as cartoony and folksy, and obviously we look at it with disgust. But like, this is who he is. He's a clown, and he wants to play clown games all day, and he doesn't actually do anything. Mike Pence is doing all this, nasty work that they're doing.
So you brought up Mike Pence. How deep is he in all of this, do you think?
He's in all of it. Like, he knows about everything that's gone on. I doubt that he would be okay with rampant corruption like this. But then you see him, and it's just like, he's done nothing, absolutely nothing, to help the country or to push back against Trump or anything. He's along for the ride. he gets to accomplish everything that he's been aiming to do in Congress when he was there. He gets to do, as the vice president, where he's basically the president, because he gets to push through his legislation and Trump gets the credit, but Trump lets him do it. Yeah. So I don't think that there's, again, I'll remind you, November 17th of 2016, that was the day. I'm sorry, I went up a different segue. That's a different thing that I was talking about. Ignore me. Okay, next question. Sorry about that. I was going to see, this is what happens when you work 18-hour days,
I'm with
too
you.
many days straight, and then you start talking about an investigation that has to do with something else. And
sorry, that's the thing. There's so much here. And, I've been saying this for a while. This administration is like, every day being blasted in the face with a fire hose of all of the things that would have tanked any other administration. And I look at the Bolton, thing. The fact that you had the former national security advisor coming out and saying, he did exactly what he's accused of. He did it. He admitted it to me. And then you have the former chief of staff coming out and go, I believe him. Name any other time in American history where a president could be accused of something. Think back to Reagan and Iran-Contra. What would have happened if the national security advisor would have come out and said, well, he knew all about it all along. In fact, he wanted it. And you had a former chief of staff going, yeah, I was there. What would have happened?
They would have forced him to resign. I don't think that people would have been able to survive this level of scrutiny and this in this environment. It's different somehow, because he's got so many different things going on. We can't usually focus on one thing. We can't focus on one scandal because there's so many. So we got to hit this one and that one, and then it splits the difference, dilutes it, and makes it so it's hard to focus on one thing. And now Ukraine has led us to be able to focus on one thing: maximum corruption, using taxpayer dollars to bribe another country to personally investigate Americans. It's in order to also get personal benefit for his political campaign. This is beyond corruption. Like, it's beyond criminal. It is something that a dictator would do. And that's not a joke. That's not, something where we're talking in punditry or anything like that. That's a fact. Like, by definition, he is becoming, if he already isn't, a dictator.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, if he gets a not guilty verdict here, all bets are off as to what he is willing and able to do after that, because he'll just become untethered. He'll know he got away with it for now, and then he can cheat in the election. And Republicans seem to be okay with that because they think it'll help them. So it's just, it's really awful to see this happen to our country. But I can't say that you and I and your listeners didn't expect it.
Yeah. Now here's the good thing. Because I had predicted pre-Bolton's comments that the Republicans would ram this right through. There would be no more witnesses. There'd be no more documents. We'd had this conversation that it would be over by the time of the State of the Union on February 4th. I don't think that's going to happen now. I don't think he's going to be able to do his victory lap at the State of the Union. And I got to wonder if he shows up. I'm sure he will, but I got to wonder where what that looks like.
That's going to be interesting. I think this year's State of the Union, he's going to make it provocative and try and distract from everything going on. I do not think, I want to make sure that it's clear. As of right now, they are ending this trial on Friday.
Right.
And so despite the news reports and everything about him not having the votes, it doesn't mean that won't change. And so that may be a flare to Trump publicly. They wanted to get Republicans to complain to the Republican offices about, why aren't you voting for this? So this is a great way to fire up his base and be like, oh, we don't have, McConnell's the one who said this. Oh, we don't have the votes. The response then, they'd assume we slow down and their side, speeds up and freaks out.
Right. So do you see this being over by that Monday then?
No, I don't. I see it again. I see it ending on Friday as of right now, and him getting acquitted
On Friday without the new witnesses.
Yeah.
Really?
And now tomorrow, at noon, in the Hart Senate office building, there's a big protest that's going on. So I recommend everybody join, and I think that might be the tipping point where if that is a full Senate building, that'll spark rallies across the country. And I think that vision of hope for people cheering for his removal, I think that hopefully will tip the scales and then extend it. But as of right now, it ends on Friday. Now, I think, again, everything rides on tomorrow and Thursday. Like, that determines what happens on Friday, especially tomorrow. So tell everyone that you know that there's a protest at noon in D.C. If you can make it, great. If you can't make it, then amplify it. But we need all hands on deck. This is a very clearly urgent situation, and the more people we have and the more voices we have speaking out about what's happening, the better it's going to be. And tomorrow, we need to have the loudest, most pressure-filled day on Congress ever in American history. And I'm not kidding about that. I'm not joking. Like, that's the level it needs to be. They need to recognize that this is unacceptable. And us as Americans, we won't sit idly by and let them ruin our democracy.
Now, I want to clarify for a second, because I'm a little shocked, to be honest. You really don't think they're going to call Bolton? You don't think we'll get anything from Bolton with the latest poll coming out that 75% of the people polled want witnesses? You think McConnell's just going to ram this through?
Not if we don't stand up tomorrow louder than we were today, and then stand up on Thursday louder than we are on Wednesday. They're going to be able to ram it through. If things simmer down, they'll ram it through on Friday. And so we have to make sure that this is the most pressure-filled week they've ever had. Because with witnesses, you get one, you're going to get another, you're going to get documents. It starts to spill over at that point. You get information. If Bolton were to testify, he's definitely going to drop names. They'll need to become witnesses. Some people will probably try and fight testifying, so that'll take court time. And this all leads to people having time to digest and recognize how terrible it is what Trump did. And with that, I believe that removal numbers will go above 70% within the coming weeks. But that's all dependent on whether or not tomorrow is one of the loudest days we've ever had in this country.
And of course, that's the day that I get my hip surgery, so I can't even go to the rally. I won't even know that it's going on.
That's right. No, but you're there in spirit, and we'll make sure to give you a shout out, because we know that why do you the hip being replaced or whatnot. One of the reasons is because you've stood up for I'm going to say that you stood up for a democracy for years. So you got. You earned it. You're one of the guys who stands with people.
I've marched miles on picket lines and marches. Throughout all the years. I never miss a picket line. We were in Wisconsin sleeping on the marble floor in 2011 when Walker was doing his thing. Yeah, I've been on these things. I hate to miss one. And this is a big one. This is I don't know. I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but this is the moment. I mean, everyone says, "Oh, this is the most important election ever." This is the most important election in my lifetime. There's, in my mind, not a question of that.
Yeah, and it's definitely gonna come to a head. And I think again, people need to realize the importance of the step-by-step actions here, because we didn't just get a Mueller. That didn't just happen. That took a lot of steps to get there. For example, we had to work on Flynn getting fired, and then you move down the chain of events, and it's Sessions recusal, and it's Nunes fake recusal, and then you have the multiple times where it leaked out that he was going to fire Mueller or was going to try and fire Mueller. And if you look back, there are several protests over the years that filled Times Square in hundreds of cities across the country on the spur of a moment. I think one in the late fall, I'm going to get the year wrong, but there was one where it was, tens of thousands of people in Times Square, and it was within hours of us organizing anything because it had just leaked out. So again, I can't stress enough, it does matter. The visuals matter. It matters when people show up from across the country like they will tomorrow. It matters that they're coming from, they're taking vacation days. They're taking days off as teachers, as police officers. Members of the military are coming, veterans as well. We have Reverend Barber and a bunch of other people from across the country that are, activists and people that are working class people. This is not. There's a lot of people who want to stand up and speak, and everybody should have a voice. And I think that this is going to become a time in American history where if we do stand up and we speak loudly and clearly and we turn the level up every single day, we're going to win back the White House. We're going to take out the Senate and win that back. And then we're going to keep the House. And then we'll be able to uncover all of the corruption for real.
Yeah. Do you see that happening? I mean, because we haven't done that as a matter of I haven't seen it in my lifetime where an administration goes after the previous administration, or they usually let them walk. Do you see it being different this time with all of the things that Trump is accused of, from emoluments violations to the kind of corruption that you're talking about with money changing hands and all? Do you see them going after him for this post presidency?
I will not let them not. There's no way that I'm going to let this all go, because we can't have this repeated ever again. And so I can tell you that I'm not going to let any of his crimes go. And I think anybody involved with it should be prosecuted or investigated. And I think that we're going to need to uncover a lot of different corruption. And then we'll also, on top of that, have to make new laws. Because we got to make a more qualified structure for the requirements around the presidency. Obviously, a mental health check would be a start.
That would be helpful. So last question I've got for you, because you look at the Mueller, you look at the Bolton book, from what we're hearing, this manuscript that they've handed over that the White House had for an entire month. And evidently, according to Bolton's lawyer and according to Bolton, they didn't leak it. There's one copy out there. The White House got it. So somebody there leaked it. There have been some other things that have come out about Bill Barr, who has had some problems about Trump's authoritarian tendencies, looking at China, looking at North Korea, Turkey, for instance. How big will this book be for the election, do you think?
It's obviously a game changer, whether you intended to be or not. I think that it'll be one of many books by different people that are going to try and milk the situation for what it is. I find it disgraceful for these people to just make money off a book. Get off your butt, go in front of the cameras on any show anywhere, do a press conference, spill all the beans.
That's it. John Bolton, come on the show and tell the truth.
Anytime, anywhere. And that's really what we would expect. And the first person to do that person's going to sell books. That person's going to be, heralded or something, no matter who they are. Yeah. At this point. The bar is so low for what's been going on. It's just pathetic. But I think that we have a great way forward. We have the momentum. Don't forget that we won in Virginia, New Jersey, Alabama, and Kentucky. We won back the House. We got him impeached. We, worked and got the Mueller report, uncovering more evidence, and we are still working, obviously on his removal and getting witnesses. So, and everybody told us that impeachment wasn't ever going to happen, and
it's all impossible. But
don't
here,
call
here it is.
impeachment.
It's done.
Great.
Scott, I appreciate the time. Great stuff as always. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks. I'll get some sleep. No more brain
Do
farts.
that. Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
The world has entered into a realm of a 2-minute warning.
Doomsday clock inches closer to midnight thanks to climate change.
The new rollback is expected to be announced today that could potentially put more pollution into our waters.
Trump further weakens pollution standards for streams and wetlands. China announces national ban on single-use plastics. Plus, massive locust swarm threatens food security in East Africa.
Coming up next, the slaying of the firstborn. All of those plagues and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The world is going to be flooded, and Trump is like, wait, poison the water first. I want to make this the best apocalypse of all time.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, locusts, apocalypse, and now the doomsday clock.
Yes, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has moved up the famous symbolic doomsday clock that represents existential threats to humanity. Well, they've moved it up to 100 seconds to midnight. It's the first time the clock has passed within the 2-minute mark in its more than 70-year history.
Even during the Cold War, it was never this close to midnight.
Right. The scientists say they moved up the clock to call attention to the growing threats of nuclear war, climate change, and the spread of disinformation. In a press conference, former California Governor Jerry Brown, now a Bulletin board member, called moving up the clock a blaring klaxon call to America.
Tell me, how else can we tell people where we're at? How else can we wake up the Democrats, the Republicans, the independents, the millionaires, the billionaires, the media owners who carry on their life as though they're on the Titanic, about ready to hit an iceberg, and they're not worried? This is the moment, if there ever was, to wake up.
And as if we needed any more signs of apocalypse, the United Nations has called for international help to fight a massive invasion of locusts sweeping across the East African nations of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. The ravenous insects are destroying crops and farmland, threatening food shortages in a vulnerable region already ravaged by climate change-intensified drought and extreme storms. Massive locust swarms occur during very specific weather conditions, but global warming is changing rainfall patterns across Africa, affecting the timing of heavy rains that has helped generate the biggest swarm in 70 years.
Any sign of rivers filled with blood yet?
No, not yet. The affected nations are having to resort to aerial spraying of pesticides to control the infestation. The UN has called for international aid to, quote, avert any threats to food security, livelihoods, and malnutrition for millions of people. Meanwhile, here in the United States,
speaking of plagues,
the Trump administration late last week finalized a rule to strip away environmental protections for streams, wetlands, and other small water bodies. The new rule significantly weakens strict standards for drinking water that were established by the Obama administration. The new regulations remove limits on how much pollution can be dumped into small streams and wetlands that feed into America's drinking water supply. The rollback strips protections for more than half of the nation's wetlands, allows landowners to dump pesticides into waterways, allows mining and industrial companies to dump industrial waste, and it also allows developers to build over wetlands. Environmental groups say they will sue to block the rollbacks.
So while this is supposed to be good for farmers, in fact, it's good for the real estate business?
Yes.
Just a coincidence, I'm sure.
A big heads up for folks in Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. Grist.org reports that the fracking industry is lobbying those states' regulators to allow them to dump polluted fracking wastewater, called produced water, into your streams and rivers. The fracking process uses up millions of gallons of water for every new well, and the boom in fracking has resulted in a glut of contaminated wastewater. Drillers say it's too expensive to treat the water, and injecting it can cause earthquakes, so they're looking for cheap places to dump it. In the courts, 4 coastal Louisiana Native American tribes have bypassed the U.S. legal system to file a formal complaint with the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, accusing the U.S. government of violating their human rights by failing to take action on climate change. According to the complaint, sea level rise and coastal erosion are drowning tribal burial sites in southern Louisiana, and the loss of land threatens the tribe's source of food. And finally, some good news. China, one of the world's biggest users of plastic, which has for years been struggling to deal with an epic plastic pollution problem, has announced it will ban single-use plastics across the country. In a fairly rapid phase-in, non-degradable single-use plastic bags will be banned in major cities in China by the end of this year and banned in all cities and towns within 2 years. And the restaurant industry will be banned from using single-use straws by the end of 2020.
That's good news. Doesn't make up for the rest of your report, Doyen.
Sorry.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So good on Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf, who today renewed his push to raise the minimum wage. His plan would raise the wage to $12 an hour on July 1st, 2020, and then incrementally it would rise to $15 an hour by 2026. Understand the current minimum wage in Pennsylvania is still $7.25 an hour. The governor said today there's momentum to finally raise the wage, but momentum in the capital doesn't put food on the table in workers' homes. He said too many workers are still struggling to get by because Pennsylvania hasn't raised its minimum wage in more than a decade. Actually, it's 14 years here in Pennsylvania since the last time the state raised the minimum wage, and that was up to $7.15. A little over 10 years ago, the feds raised it up to $7.25. But here in the state, the Republicans haven't allowed an increase in almost 14 years. It's just amazing to me. And here's the other part of this. What we're seeing happening as well here in Pennsylvania is not only are they keeping the minimum wage at poverty levels, they're trying to keep all jobs at poverty levels. And we're seeing another parasite coming into the Commonwealth, fighting people's right to join and form unions and to put that block in the way. That's why I've asked Steve Katniss to come talk with us. He's the president of SEIU Local 668. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me on.
So I'm looking at this story that I just came across today, that evidently this West Coast Freedom Foundation, the Koch folks, are moving into Pennsylvania. Is that right?
That's what it sounds like. That's what they're saying.
Now, if I remember right, these are the people who dress up in green shirts to pretend like they're AFSCME members, or in purple shirts to pretend like they're SEIU members, and then going to people's homes and saying, hey, there's a way for you to get money back from your union, and try and get them to, 1, drop out of the union, and 2, desert their union. Is this the same group?
I think so, yeah. I kind of have to give them a little bit of credit. They had a little press conference, and by little, I mean like they had 2 guys standing there talking about what their long-term plans were. But I give them credit for how brazen they are in some of their tactics. They've done things like wear the shirts of unions and kind of act like they're union workers, going into union families' homes and trying to encourage them to drop their union. They sat in Harrisburg today and said they plan on running a political campaign where they go and by any means necessary figure out our members' private information, and then just use all the resources just to get them to drop out of their union. they're at least transparent about what their goal is, and that's just to erode their power.
No, and the goal is to destroy unions, and with it, and look, with it comes the middle class that was built by union labor. With it go the decent wages, the good health care benefits, the retirement security that you get. I mean, all of those things go away.
Yeah, and it's when you have these guys go up and say this is their goal, you have to ask, like, well, where are they getting their money from, right? And you touched on it that a lot of this is Koch money. A lot of this from the Koch Foundation. But they're also getting funding from the Davos family, from the Bradley family, from the Scaife Foundation. This is something the LA Times reported on a few years ago. And really you have to ask yourself, why are these organizations, why are these billionaires putting money into these people's pockets? And it's not to further any workers' interest. We've seen that with Davos and the way she's handled the Department of Education. It really is to break down the power of unions and the ability to, advocate for people. So when they come knocking on your doors, it's not for some positive reason. It's not to help your community. They're coming from the West Coast to break union power, and that's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those examples, and I think about my grandfather whenever you see stories like this. My grandfather always said, if a rich guy is going to spend $1 to tell you don't need something, you better spend $2 to get it.
Right.
Because they understand return on investment, and the return on the investment that Koch and Olin and Bradley and Scaife and all of these people are throwing into this is that they're going to have more power to control what workers get and what happens to them. And this is just another one of those moments where you got to stop and think about what's really at stake when these folks come to your door.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels like, for lack of a better term, it feels like a grift. If from what we've at least seen so far, and we're hopeful this is the case in Pennsylvania as well, from our sister locals in SEIU on the West Coast, they've had to deal with these attacks, and they've had to deal with the Freedom Foundation coming in and throwing lawsuits at them, frivolous as they may be, but they don't tend to see major membership drop-offs. So while these folks kind of talk about saying all these are their great results, really what it tends to be is billionaires who have money to waste throwing it into an organization that they think is going to erode union strength. And we're hopeful that our results in Pennsylvania kind of pattern off of what we've seen on the West Coast, that when they knock on people's doors, I think most of our members are smart enough to know that there's, they're trying to sell them something and they're not selling them something in their favor.
At the minimum, slam the door in their face.
Yeah.
At the maximum, maybe let the dog out.
Yeah, we.
I'm not advocating you sig your dog on them. I'm not going there.
I'm with you on that one at least, but no, it's funny because when the news came out today, some of our members were saying, "I hope they knock on my door so I can slam it in their face or tell them what I think." We had heard rumors that these folks would be trying to come to Pennsylvania, and so we made little window decal stickers that say, no anti-union solicitation allowed. This is a SEIU home, and it really is one of the more popular things that our members like to get from us, just some type of identifying badge that we don't want these folks in our community. But I mean, I think that is the key thing here. I think they feel like they have an opportunity to walk into people's homes on an individual basis, feed them some lies, and they think it'll go somewhere. But we're again hopeful that most workers aren't gonna buy the lies.
Yeah, you see me, I look at this, Steve, and I say the hope is that people get fed up enough and realize that the moneyed interests are really trying to destroy their ability to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions, and then become much more militant, like my grandparents' generation was. I've often said I hope union members. I want union members to hold on to their union card the way some of my NRA friends hold on to their NRA card. To me, I think workers are going to have to get that militant once again to stave off these attacks.
And it's a shame, too, because, a lot of the news that labor tends to get in the news cycle tends to be from these anti-organizations, doing things to get attention and publicity to, I guess, push their efforts. But, just before I came on, you were talking about the governor re-emphasizing his push to raise the minimum wage. I've talked to people from other states, and they're just they're surprised Pennsylvania, of all states, still has a $7.25 minimum wage. The fact that the compromise that we were looking for a few months back was significantly lower than that, and it still couldn't get across. We live in a state with basically an inactive government that can't get anything done. It doesn't benefit working people at the very least. And just as a sign of our times, the fact that these folks feel like they're going to run a political campaign because the government in Pennsylvania is too controlled by unions, I wish that was the case, because if unions controlled our state government in Pennsylvania, you would see much more worker-friendly legislation passing by. You certainly would not see poverty wages in the state.
No, that's an
I think their goal is to keep it that status quo.
No, that's an excellent point. I mean, I've often said I wish labor was as big as they tend to try and
Right.
make it out to be. When you're talking about 10.2% of the workforce, down from the high of 35% of the workforce, the power is diminishing. But still, I mean, this is one of those moments that. Regardless, the fact that the billionaire class still sees this as a whipping boy where we're going to spend money to go after. And arguably, I don't think they really care if they get results. It's about getting you guys spinning your wheels, defending yourself in frivolous lawsuits, and organizing the organized so that you don't go back. You can't go out and organize 35% of the workforce again.
Yeah, I hope these out-of-state grifters wasting some more billionaire money can convince them that they're making a sound investment in Pennsylvania attacking unions, when really it's just a big waste of their time and their money. We feel that's going to be the case, and so ultimately speaking, if that's what these guys want to waste their money on until they realize otherwise, I think they're in for a rude surprise in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I hope so. But coming back to the governor and what's going on in Harrisburg, these issues I think have to be discussed. They have to be front and center. The fact that, as you pointed out, we couldn't even get a paltry. What did Scott Wagner want? 875 was. I think he was
right.
I think he was willing to go 875 over 3 years, and they couldn't even get that passed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is shameful, right? I've heard that a lot of business groups will only even go a little bit higher than 950, and the government couldn't even get to that point. I was actually looking over the history of Pennsylvania and what we've had. We've had majority control from the same party for at least since in both chambers since 1995. Is that right? At least the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And regardless of what party is in constant control, when you have these same folks with a governing majority for that long, they don't feel like they're accountable to anybody except for the people that pay them to stay in office.
And that comes back to the gerrymandering that has gone on. I mean, I often tweet out my senatorial district, which looks like the little Calvin kid bent over having gas. Because it's the most bizarre drawing that you'll ever see. And you go, why did you have to gerrymander central Pennsylvania? It's just, I guess, because they wanted just a little bit more of an advantage.
Yeah. I guess that same phrase, by whatever means necessary to them, when that comes to folks fighting for equal rights, that's the scariest thing to say. But for them holding their power, I guess they're just willing to do it, right?
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. So real quick, I want to go back to this Freedom Foundation group, because I'm hoping that when they do come, I mean, because here's the part that's frustrating to me, and I just learned about this a couple years ago, that these groups can petition to the state to get every state worker's home address, which to me is really just a massive invasion of privacy. And then you end up having people knocking on your door. Is there a way to say, look, I don't want these people knocking on my door, and if they come to my door, I want them arrested? I mean, is there anything your members can do to protect themselves right from the start?
I mean, we do our best to try to keep our members' information private. When some of these freedom of information requests are made, for public transparency, there's not a heck of a lot we, at least organizationally, can do, because, to be fair, and in certain cases, the public does have a right to knowledge. Our members, though,
what knowledge is what your home address?
Yes, no, I agree. To your point, yeah, no. For the most part, with our membership, it's mostly lower to middle class workers, right? Public servants on a day-to-day basis who are just working for a living wage. We're able to at least usually keep that information from going out, but these folks have found different ways to get them in different states. We've had reports of our members from some of our sister unions in PA, some of the bigger ones. They've gotten letters from these people. They've found different ways to find public lists, whether it's from those types of requests or not. So they're getting the information one way or the other. They're kind of just sending out letters regardless of, for example, a bunch of workers got a letter saying, hey, government union employee. In other states, we saw similar letters that went out that said, like, specifically, say, AFSCME or SEIU. So they're finding ways to figure out where people live. They may not know which union you're with, what you do, or who you are, but they have a suspicion you're with a union, so they have the money to just take the guess. So to a certain degree, we can protect some of the information, but where we are in our modern environment where think about all the political campaigns that knock on your door, the way voter ID goes out there, people know what party you're with, where your residency is. There's a lot of voter information out there that can be tied to whether you're a union member or not as well. Yeah, so we do our best, but there's a lot of stuff out there that one way or the other, these folks are probably going to find where people are. But we'll do our best not to,
It's angering and it's frustrating, and nobody should have to put up with it. And again, I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping they're not successful, and I'm hoping they do just spend a whole bunch of money. But again, it's another one of those things just really infuriating.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
Steve, I appreciate the time. Keep up the fight, brother.
Thanks for having me on, Rick. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Again, and this is one of those moments where the deception, it's just pure deception, that they're going to show up to your house, dressing in, because AFSCME always wears green, SEIU always was purple, UFCW always wears yellow. So that's kind of their color. And to have people who are specifically, targeting those folks, and then go, hey, we're just like you, with the goal of undermining the whole thing it's despicable. Just plain despicable. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if one of these people contacts you. I would love to see their material. I'd love to hear your stories. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. That was the day the first unemployment insurance law was established in the United States. It happened in Wisconsin. Governor Philip La Follette signed the Unemployment Compensation Act. La Follette had a reputation as a progressive leader. Under the new law, employers were required to contribute to a fund based on their payrolls. Many across Wisconsin were out of work due to the Great Depression, but not all workers were covered by the act. Farm workers, domestic workers, railroad workers, teachers, and loggers were among those excluded. Employers with less than 10 workers also did not have to participate. Due to the Great Depression, it took a while to build up enough money in the insurance pool to actually pay out benefits. California, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Utah, and Washington soon followed Wisconsin's lead. Then, in 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into law. Part of this act was to encourage states to establish unemployment insurance systems for their workers. The first unemployment insurance benefit check went to Niles Rudd of Madison, Wisconsin on August 17, 1936. He was an out-of-work photo engraver. He received the maximum allowable benefit of $15. Today, unemployment insurance programs remain a federal-state partnership administered under state laws. That means each state has a different maximum dollar amount and length of time the benefits can be used. Recently, unemployment insurance protections have been rolled back in some states. Since 2011, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and North and South Carolina have all cut the amount of time that people can receive unemployment benefits. In North Carolina, that length dropped from 26 weeks down to just 14.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
So evidently the United States Postal Service claimed that they saved $10 billion as they cut wages between 2016 and 2018 and went after health care benefits. problem is they failed to account for the costs that were associated with the higher turnover and the increased overtime. They're actually saying it was nowhere near $10 billion. But again, you can't let a good narrative go to waste of, if we just lower their wages, we'll save money. Now, the weird thing about the Postal Service is you go back to the George W. Bush years where they put that mandate on the Postal Service to pre-fund their health care for 75 years into the future. So literally people who aren't even born yet they're paying into a fund for workers who aren't even born yet. Stop and think about that for a second. And look, there's a part of me that understands why. They're trying to destroy the Postal Service so that they can privatize it. And the right wing would love nothing more than to privatize our U.S. Postal Service, because it would be the biggest land ripoff since we stole the country from the Indians. Because understand what the Postal Service has: tons of property in every community, and prime property in every community. What a ripoff it would be if they privatized the whole thing. But again, this is the Republican ideology, and I'll tell you that I think the Postal Service does a damn good job of getting our mail to and from us in a reasonable amount of time for a low cost. 55 cents anywhere in the country? You kidding me? Just amazing stuff. But I'm 100% against the idea of privatizing the Postal Service. Just throwing that out. But like I said, the money that they claim they save, they didn't, according to the Government Accountability Office, who actually bothered to crunch up the numbers. And, again, this is another one of those moments where, going back to what we were talking about with Steve, you've got this force out there, this moneyed interest out there who's pushing lower wages, less health care, lower benefit rates, all of this stuff so that they can make more. I mean, I'm often reminded of Zach Wamp, the congressman from Tennessee, who during the auto crisis was saying, let them fail, screw them. Volkswagen came into Tennessee, a right-to-work state with less health care and lower wages. Let those union members learn the hard way, because they do have good health care, and they do make a reasonable wage, and they do have something of a pension at the end of the road. And it's something that, everybody should have. The weird thing is we're heading towards a retirement crisis. There's going to be a ton of people retiring who aren't going to be able to afford to be retired. But hey, never mind. We don't need no stinking unions. Amazing stuff to me. Just is what it is. And I'll tell you, I look at myself. The one thing I do not have to worry about. Tomorrow I will be having a shiny new metal hip put in. Have part of my leg chopped off. One of the things I'm not worrying about is the healthcare cost, because my union has negotiated really good health insurance. It's that simple. My concerns are, getting better. My concerns are, getting back up and being, as strong as I can get after this as quickly as I can. I'm not worried. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to not have the healthcare costs hanging over my head. Like, I've talked to some people who are like, I'd love to do it. I can't afford it. That should never be our criteria. Not in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Should never be it. And I know people are saying, we got the lowest unemployment rates. But you know what? If it weren't for Obama and the ACA, we'd have a lot more people uninsured. And what do we get from Trump and the Republicans? We're going to take that away. And what are you going to replace it with? Well, the good old days, pay or die. Again, for me, it's about these kitchen table issues. It's about people being able to earn a decent wage, have a good job with good benefits, good health care, good retirement. I don't think that's too much to ask for. And yet you've got all these moneyed interest groups who are out there pushing their poison. It's just that simple. Anyway, I want to thank everyone who wished me the best as we go in for surgery tomorrow. Thanks so much. We will be back on the 10th, taking a week and a half off. So keep up the faith, keep up the fight. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you then.
Power when
time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The opening statements, opening arguments all wrapped up. And what we saw right before us, you saw the House managers, the Democrats, take to the floor of the Senate and make a well-thought-out, logical, legal, cogent argument for the removal of this president based on facts, based on reading the transcripts, based on the testimony that was available to them. And they did it in a way that was extremely compelling. Then we saw 3 days of the Republican defense, the Trump defense, which was incoherent at best to begin, and then, brought you the whole buffet of conspiracy, dismissal, deflection, and by the way, ignoring facts, while calling their conspiracies facts, which is a weird kind of place for them to be. But when I guess it's all you've got, it's all you've got. In fact, one of the Trump lawyers, Jane Raskin, made that argument. You've heard the legal argument: when the law's not on your side, you argue the facts. When the facts aren't on your side, you argue the law. And when neither's on your side, you pound your fist on the table and you scream and holler. And where I thought she was right is she said, when none of that works, you then deflect, which is what the Republicans did. They put everything on. We got to have Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. It's all about Hunter and Joe Biden at this point. Because that's all they've got is, hey, over here, shiny thing. Hoping that all of us will go, oh, yeah, the shiny thing. Oh, and forget all of the stuff that's been laid out in front of us. Now, at the beginning of this, I did predict that Mitch McConnell would figure out a way to ensure that no new witnesses, no new documents, no anything would be admitted. They would wrap this up in no time flat, just in time for the State of the Union for Trump to go out and declare that he was exonerated. I'm happy to say I'm not sure that's going to happen because the polling that's just out, 75% of Americans, 3/4 of us, want witnesses. We want to hear John Bolton. And I said this right from the start. I want to know why John Bolton said, I don't want to be part of your drug deal. I mean, at the end of it, that's what I got to know. Rudy Giuliani taking the stand would be great. It would be great for Pompeo and Mulvaney and down the list of Trumpites. I would love to see them be cross-examined. But Bolton this week coming out and saying, yep, everything the Democrats are saying about a quid pro quo, yep. In fact, he told me he was withholding the aid until he got the investigation into Biden. And you go, were the Republicans listening? And the answer is no. But I think the American people were, because it had been 69%, I think 65% at one point who wanted. Now we've jumped up to 75%. And now we're at 50-50 in the last poll I also saw of having him convicted and removed. You call this a partisan issue? It kind of is. 75% of independents want him impeached, want to hear witnesses. 95% of Democrats want to hear witnesses, and even 49% of Republicans. That's a huge number. When almost half of the Republicans go, yeah, I think we should hear this. This could be bad. This could be really bad for Donald Trump. Because you also had John Kelly, Trump's former chief of staff, saying yes. Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, saying that Trump told him this, told him that he was withholding the aid for the investigation. And John Kelly said, I believe John Bolton. If this is any other president in the history of this country, the vote is 100-0 to impeach. He's done. Stick a fork in him. It's over. But because we live in this cult worship era where Trump has been so put up on this pedestal as some kind of mythical god, the minions don't want to hear anything. So you're never going to get them. This is about the rest of us. And ultimately, this is about, will the Republican Party be able to save itself? Because I've talked to a bunch of people who, they're not happy. Now, does that mean they're going to run over and join the Democratic Party? I don't know, but not great. And now you throw this into the mix because you've had these hearings for the last several days. The other day you had this dust up with Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and an NPR reporter, where and you can get into the argument. Well, he thought it was off the record. She recorded the whole thing. You could argue that he was angry and yelled and an expletive rant and tirade. You could argue that he was upset because he thought. When the reality is if you're in any type of situation where you're talking to a reporter, it's always on the record, unless expressly written otherwise. Except if they explicitly say this is off the record. So afterwards, he got all upset that it wasn't off the record. She recorded it. They got to do a big fight. The next day, he throws the reporters off of his press junket. The day that the Trump impeachment arguments wrap up, Trump comes out and says, "Yep, you did a good job handling her. You did a good job handling her." And you go, really? I mean, it's not bad enough that you're being impeached for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Now you're going to applaud someone from tossing reporters off of the beat? The only constitutionally protected piece of employment in this country? You're going to defend that? And again, this leads back to the very thing that I've always said. Donald Trump is an authoritarian guy. He could easily, if we allow it, turn into a dictator. And if you listen to some of his supporters, they want Trump for life. They would be okay with Donald the dictator. The rest of us better wake up to that reality and better remember we're little under 280 days away from Election Day. Register to vote. We cannot normalize the kind of behavior that is going on right now. And if you watch these Senate hearings, it's remarkable at what has become the new normal. It really is quite remarkable that anything that would have taken down any other administration, because I was thinking about this. What if Ronald Reagan's former national security advisor came out and said that Ronald Reagan knew everything about Contra, Iran-Contra, and in fact, pushed the Iran-Contra scheme, and his former chief of staff came out and said, yeah, I believe him. What exactly do you think would have happened back then? They would have run Reagan out on the rails. No question in my mind at that period in history. We are now with a very different Republican Party. And it's very clear, even with the overwhelming evidence and the push from this Bolton, because if this Bolton thing doesn't come out, and I believe that it was I believe it was the NSA. I believe it was somebody in the NSA who leaked this document, because there's only one of them. And John Bolton and his lawyer said he didn't do it. There's one copy, and that's the copy that was given to the White House almost a month ago. They're the only ones who had it. So someone in that chain leaked that. Because look, the Republicans aren't going to save us. The Republicans are not the saviors. Just that simple. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. The working people come to talk.
On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day Carmelita Torres led the Bath riots at the El Paso-Juarez border. Mexican workers traveled daily across the Santa Fe Bridge from Juarez, Mexico, into El Paso, Texas for work.